So to begin, I'll press T on the keyboard to get the text tool. I'll click on my canvas and I'll type the word gaming. And the name of this font is Striker. You can get it on FontSpace. I'll hold Ctrl and Shift and scale this text up. I'll scale it up some more. I'll press T again to get the text tool and I'll double click right there. I'll just select that G and I'll increase its size to a greater size. So I'll come over to the font size and I will give it a bigger size, like 400. Let's try 400. Yeah, about that much is good. That's about right. And with that selected, I'll press Ctrl C to copy that. I'll click right there, I'll backspace, and I'll Ctrl V to paste it right there. Actually, well, it didn't paste the size, so we'll just manually change the size to 400 in this side as well. I'll select over everything. I'll go to Path, Object to Path, Path, Split Path. And now I will, all of these different alphabets are now separate paths of their own. So what I want to do is I'll click on this G and I'll flip it on the horizontal axis like that. I'll select over everything. I'll come over to the Align and Distribute menu and I will click right here to even the horizontal gaps. And then I will click right there to center them on the horizontal axis like that. And that looks good. That is about right. And now what I want to do is I want to create an arch text, right? I want to create an arch effect at the bottom right here. So to do that, I'll select over everything. And do I want to reduce the spacing? Actually, I just keep this. Actually, maybe I will actually reduce the spacing. So to do that, I'll select over the first three alphabets and I'll just hold Control and space. I'll slide them to the right like that, and I'll select over everything and I'll click on that button to even the horizontal gaps, and that will reduce the spacing a tiny bit. And now I'll select over everything. I'll go to Path, Union. And what I want to do now is, with that selected, press N to get the nodes tool, all of these bottom nodes, and I want to drag them down. So I'll just click right there and I'll just drag my mouse horizontally to select over all of those. Actually, no, I want to select those nodes and I also want to select all of these nodes. So I'll hold Shift and I will select all of these nodes as well. And lastly, I'll select this node as well. And with all of those selected, I'll just click on one of these nodes, hold Control and drag them down like that to about that much. Once you've done that, what I'll do is with that selected, I'll just make it white. I'll click on the rectangle tool and I will form a rectangle that goes over everything. I'll lower that to the bottom and I'll give it a black fill color. And I'll just zoom out a tiny bit. I'll click over the ellipses and circles tool and I will make an ellipse, like a flat looking ellipse. And I will bring this to the top. Hold Control. Actually, with that selected, I'll shift click on the text and I will center them both on the vertical axis with that button. I'll click on the ellipse and I'll hold Control to slide it, to snap it on the vertical axis, and then I'll drag my mouse and I'll slide it like that. And I'll place it right there. And to make the arch effect more aggressive, all I have to do is just take this handle and just pull it down. And that will make this effect more aggressive, right? What I'll do is I'll pull it up, actually make it go up, raise it up a little bit, and I will drag this down a bit more. That seems good. Maybe I'll raise it up a tiny bit more and I'll make this even more like that. And that is what our arch effect is going to look like. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, I think that is good. I think right about there is pretty good. So I'll, with that selected, shift click on the text, go to Path and Difference, and that will give us that result. Click on the rectangle and delete that. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to give this text a little bit of a perspective. To do that, come over to the path, come over to path and click on the path effects menu to open up the path effects menu. And then right here you want to search, click on this text, and then from the drop down search for perspective. And what you want to do is this menu, you want to click right here on mirror movements on the vertical axis, and press N to get the nodes tool, and you'll see these four corner nodes. Click on this bottom node and just pull it out like that, about that much. Maybe a bit more, about that much is good. And then come back over to the selector tool, come over to path, object to path to finalize that. And now I want to press Ctrl D to duplicate that. I'll give it a black fill color. I'll give that duplicate a black fill color, lower that to the bottom, and I'll come over to the path effects menu, and this time I'll give that an offset. From the drop down, select miter and click on live update to see the difference. And I want to give it an offset thick enough that I cover up all of these empty spaces. Maybe right about there is good. And I'll come over to path, object to path, and I'll finalize that. So with that done, I'll click on the black object, I'll press Ctrl D and duplicate that. I'll lower that to the bottom, and I'll hold Ctrl and Shift and I'll scale it down. I'll turn snapping off, and I'll hold Ctrl and Shift and I'll scale it down. And I'll lower that. About that much. And I want to connect these areas right here, join them together. To do that, I'll press B to get the Bezier pen. I'll turn snapping on, and I will press B to get the Bezier pen. And I'll click right there, join it right there, and I'll do the same thing on this side. And with that, select shift click right there, and then shift click on this one, go to path and union, and that will unionize that to give you that result. What I want to do next is I will select, I'll actually go ahead and select over everything. I'll select over everything, and I will press Ctrl Shift D to make sure everything is ungrouped, and then I'll press Ctrl D and I'll come over to path and do a union to unionize that. I'll lower that to the bottom, and I'll give that an offset as well. So I'll come over, click on offset. With that selector, I'll click on offset, and with the same settings, I'll just go ahead and give that a nice, I'll change the color actually to orange, and I'll just give that a nice looking offset of about that much thickness, maybe a bit more. Right about there just looks pretty good. And next, what I'll do is I will click on this text, this white object. I'll duplicate that. I'll lower that one step, and I'll give it, for now I'll just give it a different color, and I'll just nudge it down with the keyboard about that much. About that much is good. And I'll give that, I'll come over to the fill and stroke menu, and I'll give that, I'll come over to the fill tab, and I'll give that a linear gradient. Come over to this top, make the transparency 100%, and I'll press G to get the gradient tool. I'll click on that text, and I'll press G to get the gradient tool. I'll click on that node, or on that, yeah, on that node, and I will give that an orange color, and I'll click on that gradient or that node, and I'll give that a blue color like that. Yeah, maybe a little bit lighter. I guess that is fine. That's good. And one last thing, this is obviously optional. You don't have to do this uh, if you don't want to. One last thing I want to do is I'll press B to get the Bezier pen. I'll turn snapping off. I'll click right there and I will click right about there. And I'll come somewhere close to the center of this arch. And I'll just click right there, drag my mouse and just form shape or a curve similar to the curve of the object. I'll actually remove its fill and I'll give it a white stroke for now. I'll press N to get the nodes tool and I'll click on that node and click and actually you know what, I'll drag that node down by holding control on the vertical axis like that, a tiny bit. I want to make sure that the distance or the distance between this line and this orange line is the same throughout the arch or throughout the curve. So let's just make this a little bit smoother. I'll click on that on the stroke, press Ctrl D, and I'll flip that on the horizontal axis. Take that and I'll snap it right there, right there. And I'll click on that. I'll shift click on that object, and I'll raise it a little bit. And I'll press N to get the nodes tool. I'll select those two center nodes, and I'll join them with that button. And that will unionize that object into one object. And with that selected, shift click on this white object, come over to the align and distribute menu and center them on the vertical axis like that. Right there looks pretty good. So I'll click on that stroke now again. I'll come over to path and I'll click on stroke to path. I'll press M to get the nodes tool. I'll select both of those nodes. I'll just join them together and I'll do the same on this side. And I'll join those two together. And we're basically almost done. Yeah, the thickness seems right. So what I'll do is just click on the stroke now, or this object, and I'll come over to the fill and stroke menu and I'll give that a linear gradient. And from this gradient menu, there's a drop down. Click on that and I'll give that the same gradient as the text. And so the one last thing I want to do right here is I'll click on the ellipsis tool again and I'll draw an ellipse. I'll give that a fill color, let's say black, and I'll remove its stroke. And with that selected, shift click on the text, center that on the vertical axis. And I'll click on that ellipse and I'll come over and I'll drop its opacity in half. And I'll just take that and I'll raise it up to right about there. I want it to be so that at the center it's right in the middle. Maybe a little bit higher. And so right about there is good. I'll click on this white text. I'll duplicate that. Shift click on the ellipse. I'll go to path, intersection, and I'll raise its opacity. And I'll give that a light gray color. I'll give it that color and I'll click on this white text and I'll give that, I think that's good, yeah. I'll click on the white text and I'll give that, yeah, give the white text a 5% gray color. And click on the gray object and give that a 20% gray color. That looks good. And with that done, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching.